Welcome to this Conservative Home interview with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Prime Minister, welcome. In a few moments, I'm going to ask you some questions, and then we'll have some questions from among the hundreds submitted by Conservative Home readers. But before we do that, there's a video in which we're going to get your account of what you've been up to.
In 4 prime ministers and nearly 7 years of arguments, Rishi Sunak hailed what he called a decisive breakthrough on Great Britain's trade arrangements with Northern Ireland.
I believe today's meeting does mark a new beginning, an entente renewed. We are looking to the future. If they come here illegally, it will result in their detention and swift removal. This is a powerful partnership. I'm delighted to say that the government has reached agreement with unions representing over 1 million NHS workers on a fair and reasonable pay settlement. We've just agreed one of the biggest trade deals of all time, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. What we need is a long-term plan to ensure our energy security.
Prime Minister, watching that video, I get a sense of your pitch, and it's something like this. You're a serious guy, you're committed, you deliver on what you say you'll do. Now, some people will say that's great, but it's not quite enough, because after all, any politician of any party who's competent could deliver. They'll want to know what it is that drives you, what it is that gets you out of bed in the morning to do your job, and what are the ideas and beliefs and convictions that power you. How would you answer them?
Well, Paul, first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you, great to be with Con Home family as well. And to your question, I actually think, and I hear this almost repeatedly when I'm out and about across the country, is people feel that for too long that their politicians haven't been able to deliver on the things that matter to them, and they're fed up with talk and they want action. And that's why I was very careful about what I said at the beginning of this year. It was a very specific pitch to the country about what I was going to do for them to make their life better on the things that they really care about. And they're there behind me, and you'll hear me talk about them a lot. It's about halving inflation, growing the economy, reducing debt, cutting waiting lists, and stopping the boats. Those are the people's priorities. That's why they're my priorities, and I think my job is to deliver on those things, and that's the most important part of leadership and delivery that people want from me. They want from the government at this time, and that's why I'm foursquare committed to doing that.
And what's there afterwards? Because after all, you will have delivered, you say, on most of these by the end of the year. What comes then? Well,
it's great that we're talking about what comes then. These are not going to be straightforward things to achieve, right? And I think we can't forget that. We shouldn't be complacent about it. These things are not going to happen by accident, right? We've got a plan. We've got to stick to the plan to halve inflation. Why? Because the number one issue everyone's facing right now is the cost of living. And it's going up, and people are fed up with it, and rightly so. And our job is to ease that burden. We're doing lots of things to help in the short term. For example, over the course of this winter and beyond, we're paying around half of everyone's energy bill. That's worth £1,500 of support. And we've partly funded that by taxing the windfall profits of energy companies. I think that's the right and sensible thing to do. But long term, we've just got to get inflation down, and that requires discipline, it requires responsible choices, and you're seeing that in some of the way we've approached public sector pay. But we've got to deliver on that. It's not going to happen automatically. Similarly, cutting the waiting list, stopping the boats, those are not things that will just happen by accident. They will happen because a government set of ministers is going to work really hard and get the reform we need, whether it's in the NHS, work with the sector to deliver it, pass the legislation we've got in Parliament, tough, unprecedented legislation to tackle illegal migration. That will help too. Those are all the things that we've got to do this year. They're not small things, and they're going to require a lot of graft.
Okay, so you're really saying you can trust me because I'll deliver. But can I come directly to an elephant in the room, at least for some Conservatives, about this question of trust? Because some, not all but some, say, look, Rishi Sunak, you were instrumental in the fall of Boris Johnson. He was elected with a big majority. He had a mandate from the voters that, let's be frank, you don't have yet, may not have, who knows. He had a mandate from the Conservative Party, which you don't have either because you didn't win the leadership election in the summer. What's your answer to those Conservatives and Conservative and other voters who have a problem with trust?
Well, look, I think we addressed all of this last summer. We talked about it extensively. I made the decision I made for reasons that were personal to me. And there was a fundamental difference about economic policy, and that was something that I was clear about at the time, and ultimately that's why I had to resign. And that was that. And I was pretty clear and transparent about it at that moment. What happened thereafter was not my doing, right? And lots of other, we won't go, there's no point re-going over all of that, quite frankly, because I think we've got to, as a party, look forward. And I said that on the first day that I became Prime Minister, in fact. I said to the party, we've got to unite or die. And I reiterated that message, actually, in the 22 that I did just before we finished for the Easter recess, when I was talking to colleagues again. And that point I made to them, actually, we're starting to see the fruits of what a united party can do. I mean, that video was a taste of it. We're getting on and actually making a difference on a range of different areas that matter. That's coming about because we are coming together as a party, and coming together, focusing on delivering for people is the best way for us to hammer home that Conservative message across the country. It's the best way to win the next election. And that's why I just say to everybody, look, the past is the past. We've got to look forward. And we're not going to be able to achieve anything if we're not united as a party. And that's what I've been trying very hard to say to colleagues. And I think actually you're seeing, and you saw that with the vote on the Windsor framework as well, I think people recognise that was a moment of unity for our party, and more broadly, the united party is a winning party, and that's what we've got to deliver.
The past is the past, and let's not go over that. But just one last question on this theme about the future. Is the door closed to Boris Johnson coming into your cabinet?
I think I got asked about this in the past. I didn't comment on cabinet appointments. You wouldn't expect me to do that with Boris or anybody else for that matter. We've got a great team. We've got a great team, and they're focused on delivering. But more broadly, it's great that we've got former prime ministers who want to contribute still to public life and feel that they can do that. That's a good thing, and we should welcome that.
On to the local elections, and you'll doubtless make your pitch about them in a moment, but I've a very specific question about them, because in England, they're the first local elections, first set of elections ever, in fact, where you've had to turn up to prove your ID, to prove who you are when you vote. Is it all going to go smoothly without any problems at all, or are we going to be subsumed on the day by angry complaints from people who can't get out to vote, with lots of problems afterwards?
No, this has been something that's been in train for a while, so it's been well looked at. I think we rehash all the arguments why this is a sensible thing to do. I think most people think our elections should have a degree of identification, them to make sure that they're high integrity processes. Also, this is very common in lots of other places, as everybody knows. And the forms of ID, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think like 90 from memory, something like 98% of people already have those forms of ID. You can apply for a free form of ID if you don't have one of those. So it's a very easy to use process, and I think as we've tested it in the past, it's been very smooth.
Okay, one specific question about these local elections, since you've now said it's all going to be fine and the system will work very smoothly, which is, why should young people vote for the party of capitalism when they've got so little stake and capital of their own?
Are you talking specifically about home ownership? Or
home ownership is the prime example,
yeah.
But you might talk about shares, you might talk about anything.
Yeah.
The concentration of wealth in this country, it's frankly, with my generation, not younger people, why should they vote Conservative in May?
Well, let's talk about home ownership specifically, because I think that is probably the best example of what you're talking about, Paul. And look, I think first of all, I remember what it was like to get the keys to my first flat. That's a special moment in everybody's life. Everyone wants to own. The vast majority of people want to own a home, and that's something that we as a party have always been, are, and will continue to be incredibly supportive of. Now, we have to acknowledge, yes, that has been, as you say, right? That dream feels like it's out of reach for too many people. Part of our job is to try and help correct that. It's not an easy thing to do, so I think we should be honest about it. It's not something that you can fix overnight, but I think we are making progress. And I spent a lot of the time over the summer, actually, when I was talking to so many of our members, so many of our councillors about our planning system and their views on it. And what I heard consistently, particularly from our councillors and our members, was what they didn't want was a nationally imposed, top-down set of targets imposed, telling them what to do. Right? That wasn't a particularly conservative thing to do. It doesn't recognise that all our parts of our country are different, their needs are different, how they can satisfy the demand for housing is different. And you know, I said that I would make sure that our planning system reflected that, which it will, and that's what we're doing. And we are going to protect places that are special to local communities, like areas of natural beauty and the green belt. But I do think we are focusing on doing the right things as well. So we're investing in brownfield land. There's enormous opportunity to unlock brownfield sites, so we'll put a lot more investment there. We've got schemes for first-time buyers. Indeed, the vast majority of first-time buyers now don't pay stamp duty, which is great. And as a result of that, last year, I think, we saw the highest number of first-time buyers, people getting on the property ladder for the first time, highest number in something like 20 years. So yes, of course, I know that it's not as easy as it should be for too many people, but I do believe we're making progress and we'll keep at it.
Look, some people would say in response to that, you have to have sticks in the system as well as carrots, which is what Conservative governments before yours laboriously built up. And then only very recently, Conservative backbenchers drove a movement to weaken the housing targets, so fewer houses will be built. And they would say to you, as a result of those changes, will more houses really be built or fewer?
Well, you say Conservative backbenchers. I mean, I spent the summer talking to thousands and thousands of our members, our activists, our councillors, and I also heard the same message from all of them. In fact, even more loudly. In fact, everywhere I went across the summer, people wanted to talk to me about the planning system and how it was working, and I don't think there was any support for a system which imposed top-down targets on local areas without any recourse or understanding of the local circumstances. And that is the type of planning system we're delivering. We do want to build the right homes and the right number of homes. We want to build them in the right places in the right way. And that means we do need to put local people at the heart of that process. And that's why strengthening local plans is so important. And we're seeing great examples of that working well. Those are the reforms we've made, together with unlocking more brownfield housing and making sure, look, crucially, and I'm sure we'll get onto this, that one of the best ways we can help, as we talked about halving inflation, is hopefully meaning that over time we can bring interest rates down again, or the Bank of England can bring interest rates down again. That's going to be the most important factor in whether people can afford a mortgage, for example. So, look, this is important. Of course it's important. I wouldn't just say it's backbenchers, though. Thousands of our wider Conservative family expressed quite strong views on this topic to me over the summer. And then these are not easy, but I think we're striking the right balance.
Okay, I could come back on housing,
but
we haven't got time. So let me ask you about a related matter in the local elections. Keir Starmer and these Labour ads that are accusing you of being personally responsible for child abusers not being sent to prison. Now, there's been quite a lot of media criticism of Starmer for this, pointing out that he was there as Director of Public Prosecutions when the guidelines were agreed on the Sentencing Council. What there hasn't been is a lot of noise from you about it, or from Greg Hands, and there's nothing on the party's Twitter feed, attacking Labour. So isn't what you're up to this? You want to stick to your priorities for the moment, but come the general election, that's the time when you'll go negative on Keir Starmer.
Yeah, I tell you, what Greg's doing is out about campaigning every second of the day, and I get a picture from him every half hour, it seems, where he a new place that he's popped up at. So he's out and about around the country campaigning with many people who are no doubt watching at the moment, and our MPs and councillors and activists, and me and the government more broadly are getting on and focus on delivering for people. We're focused on delivering these priorities. That's what they want us to do. And I think on crime more broadly, we've actually got a good story to tell. Since 2010, since the Conservatives have been in power since then, overall crime has fallen by about 50%. Right? That's our record in government. We should be proud of that record. I think any day now we're about to deliver on the promise that was made to put 20,000 more police officers on the street. That is going to happen, as I said, any day now. We toughened up sentencing last year with a new piece of legislation, so the most violent offenders will spend longer in prison. And just the other week, we announced a new plan to tackle antisocial behaviour, which is something that I spoke about last year. It's something I talked about at the beginning of the year, and we're delivering on it so that we can have much more immediate justice when people are not following the rules. We're going to ban nitrous oxide, the range of other things we're doing to tackle antisocial behaviour, because it's a scourge that blights communities, town centres, playgrounds up and down the country. That's a Conservative government that's going to just get on and focus on the things that matter to people.
So no response from you about Keir Starmer's record at all? Not now, and not at the election either?
No, I mean, I think actually people have pointed out his record on these things, and I've said very clearly, I mean, I talked about the act that we passed last year. Right, we passed a new law to toughen up sentencing. That's not something that the Labour Party supported. They did not support our sentencing bill, which toughened up sentencing for the most violent offenders. Right, that's a statement of fact. But our record on this is one that we should be proud of. And as I said, we're doing more on antisocial behaviour because we can always do more to make sure that our communities are safe places for us to live, to grow up in, for our kids. That's what a Conservative government will deliver.
Sounds to me as though there may be more to come later. He said, Sir Keir said recently, that 99% of women, I quote, of course haven't got a penis, he said. What percentage would you put it at?
So I have a slightly different point of view to him on this, and I've been very clear that when it on this topic,
it's 100%.
Yeah, of course. But I think the first thing to say is, look, we should always have compassion and understanding and tolerance for those who are thinking about their gender. Of course we should, right? We're a compassionate and understanding society, and we will always remember that. But when it comes to these issues of protecting women's rights, women's spaces, I think the issue of biological sex is fundamentally important when we think about those questions. I've said that repeatedly, and that's why I talked about the Equalities Act last year. It's why Secretary of State Kemi written to the Commission. They've responded with some advice about the Equalities Act and how it should think about biological sex. We're in the process of looking at that. But as a general kind of operating principle for me, biological sex is vitally, fundamentally important to these questions. We can't forget that, and that's why we need to make sure, particularly when it comes to women's health, women's sports, or indeed spaces, that we're protecting those rights and those places.
Okay, on to a different matter, namely the pledge that stands out in some ways from the others, small boats. You were pledged to stop the boats, not reduce the number, not bring the number down, actually to stopping them. Will you have done that by the time of the next election?
Look, I've always also said that this is not something that is easy. It is a complicated problem where there's no single simple solution that will fix it, and I've also said it won't happen overnight, and I've been very clear about that. But people should know that it is hugely important to me, it's hugely important to the country, and we need to fix a system as a matter of fairness more than anything else. It's not fair that people are breaking the rules and coming here illegally when many people don't, and they do follow the rules and emigrate here legally. It's not fair on taxpayers, who we know are spending millions of pounds a day housing illegal asylum seekers in hotels, and all the pressure that's putting on local communities. And also, it's sort of not fair on those who actually do need our help. And this has always been a very welcoming, compassionate country. We've seen that with our response to Ukrainian refugees. But we need to make sure that we can target our resources, our compassion, our generosity on the people who most need it. And that can't happen if we have a system where tens of thousands of people are coming illegally just because they happen to be able to pay somebody. And vitally, many of them are dying. Right? We have to remember, this is about criminal gangs. Right? Criminal gangs, smuggling gangs. There's an economic business model that is here. People are dying as a result. And the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, is to try and break that cycle, to break those gangs. And that's why I think our policy not only is the fair policy, I think it's the right policy. And the legislation that we've got now in front of Parliament is the toughest legislation on this issue that any government has ever brought forward, and I believe will substantially help us solve this problem, alongside the other things that we're doing. Greater enforcement of illegal working, cooperation with other countries like France or like Albania, where we have negotiated a new returns deal that is working, and we're now returning hundreds of illegal migrants from Albania back to Albania. Obviously, Albania is a safe country. That's where they should be. Those are all the facets of this that will need to work, and that's why we're hard at it.
Okay, well, you're being very plain in making it clear you won't necessarily be able to stop them all by the time of the election. Can I come on to a related question about immigration? Because obviously small boats is only one facet of what's happening, which is the OBR has revised up its expectation for the annual rate of additional net migration to 245,000, which is apparently the highest level ever in its forecast. Is this what taking back control of immigration looks like?
Well, I think, if you remember, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think that's lower than actually numbers that we've had in the past, but it does represent a reduction. But I think your point there, though, is the right one. But the most important thing, and as I speak as someone who proudly supported Brexit, is for us to have control, right? It needs to be us. It needs to be the government that is in charge of saying who can come here and on what basis. I think that is the most important thing, and actually more broad, and we now have a system that allows us to do that. And that was one of the benefits of Brexit, is that we are now in control, and we're always looking at that to make sure that that system is working as intended. But fundamentally, the decisions about who's coming here, what they're doing when they're here, are they contributing appropriately? Those are questions that we are now in control of, and we can put the system in place that delivers on our objectives, which we are doing. The most important question, though, on migration, the thing that everyone talks to me about, is not that. What they talk to me about is the boats and what we're doing to stop the boats. And that is overwhelmingly the migration topic that people talk to me about, and that's raised with my colleagues in Parliament as well.
Obviously, everyone will want to have a look at the figures, but it is a fact, isn't it, that you're not going to be able to get the growth you want for the economy without, in your plan, quite substantial amounts of migration.
No, I think if you look at one of the things in the Chancellor's budget recently, was further reforms to the welfare system to make sure that we are supporting people to move off welfare and into work. I think one thing that's been highlighted is the increase in the number of inactive people who are not working, and the number of people who have left the labour force. I think all of us would want to say, hang on, ideally we would support people into work where they can work, and we need to have a welfare and a benefit system that is supportive of that. Right? That is a very conservative approach. I believe work is a good thing. It is a good thing for people to be doing. It's something that we as Conservatives value. We want to support people into work. We want to reward hard work, and I'm sure we'll get on to talking about tax at some point as well, in that vein. But the welfare system needs to play its part, and that's why the Chancellor's reforms, making sure that people who are on welfare are part of a regime which is looking at what they can do, making sure that they are doing the work that they are able to do, making their welfare conditional on them participating in that regime. I think that is an entirely reasonable and fair approach to this question, and as I said, we are supporting people to do that.
Final question from my section, because we have to move on. There's so much we could talk about, but just for a moment, who is right about China and Taiwan? Is it Emmanuel Macron, or is it Liz Truss?
Well, I can tell you what our view, and my view and the government's view is on China, and it is expressed in the new integrated review that we published, where we're very clear about the challenge that China poses, and particularly the threat it poses to our economic security. And we're very explicit about calling that out and making it clear that we need to protect ourselves against that. What I'd say, though, is I think more than talk and language, actions are what matter, and we have taken robust action where necessary since I've been Prime Minister. For example, we've blocked investment into a semiconductor company because we were worried about where that was coming from. We've taken other measures with regard to investment in other sectors as well. And then the other thing I'd say is our approach is completely aligned with our allies. I was just talking to President Biden about this yesterday, but if you look at the approach of our closest allies on this, whether it's Canada, whether it's Japan, whether it's Australia or the US, our approach to this question is exactly the same. Our language is exactly the same, and actually, as I was talking to the President about yesterday and Prime Minister Albanese from Australia just a few weeks ago, we're all working very closely on how we approach this, and most recently us joining the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership is a great example of us projecting our
Prime
influence.
Minister, just hang on a moment. The point that Liz Truss was making yesterday, where she disagrees with Macron, was that Macron was arguing, and this is his specific quote, that Europe should become a third superpower. Macron says it should. Truss says it shouldn't. What do you think?
Actually, I haven't seen her comments, so I can't really comment on them
But you've seen
in
Macron's,
particular.
presumably.
No, well, I think on this question about European superpowers and all the rest of it, like that, so look, we left the EU, we're the UK. But I'd say when it comes to our foreign policy, look what happened in the space of just a couple of weeks, right? We were able to, negotiate the Windsor Framework, right, which is something that secures Northern Ireland's place in the Union. And that was incredibly important to me to do, but that involved working and negotiating robustly with the EU. We got that done. We had a very successful Anglo-French summit, first one in years, with some real tangible outcomes for us on tackling illegal migration, much better cooperation, more boots on the ground in France, which is again, I think, a sign of success. Right after that, I went to the US to announce an unprecedented multilateral defence partnership with our Five Eyes partners, Australia and America, about nuclear-powered submarines. And you've just seen the visit yesterday as well. And then we've just joined, as I said, this incredible Pacific region trade deal, the first non-region country to do so, to accede to that. I think that is a demonstration that the UK is active, it's engaged around the world in all the places that matter. We don't need to be part of the EU to be a foreign policy superpower. We are a foreign policy superpower. We're doing things that other countries can't do. We can operate in all those places that I just mentioned. I think that's unique. I think that's one of our great strengths as United Kingdom, the fact that we can play in all these different regions in Europe, in the Pacific, with the Americans. That's because of our country and the relationships we have, the respect that people have for us. And as you've seen over the last few weeks, that is producing tangible outcomes that are good for the country, good for our people, and I think everyone should be proud about that.
Okay, Prime Minister, we're now going to go over to questions from our readers, and the first one should come up any moment now.
I'm Kashmir from Nottingham. My question to the Prime Minister is, what are your views on the ECHR, and should we have our very own British Bill of Rights?
So it's actually relevant for the small boats question. And look, my view on this is straightforward, is that the bill that we've brought forward is what we need to tackle this problem. Now, I believe that it is compliant with our obligations under the ECHR. We worked very hard to design a piece of legislation that is tough, but that we believe is keeping with our international obligations. But look, clearly, as you've seen, we've had to make what's called a Section 19(1)(b) statement that demonstrates that we're taking an approach that is novel, that is untested, that's ambitious. I don't make any apologies for that. I think this problem is particularly challenging and it requires that type of approach. So look, clearly everyone can see that we are being ambitious and novel in how we're approaching this, whilst being compliant with our international obligations. But I'm confident that the bill is the right approach to this problem. We need to make sure we focus on getting it through Parliament as quickly as possible.
And what do you do if there's an interim adverse judgment from the court?
Look, and there may well be, and we knew that with Rwanda. So that was, that's always likely to happen in these cases, and we will robustly challenge those, as we are doing with the Rwandan cases that are currently working their way through the court system. The good news on that is we've had one judgment already, which has been very strongly in the government's favour. That's being appealed, so we'll go and robustly argue our case again at the Court of Appeal. I think you have to expect legal challenge on these things. Our job is to robustly defend them, and that's what we'll do.
Okay, we've got to move to our second video question.
Hello, Prime Minister. I'm Brandon and I'm from Lichfield. My question to you, Prime Minister, is do you think that the Stormont break will be an effective mechanism regarding any attempts from the European Union to erode the UK's sovereignty? Thank you.
Hi, Brandon. Right, it's from Lichfield, Michael Fabricant territory. Superb. Actually, I discussed this with Michael and others a lot. I do. I mean, I think the Stormont break is a real breakthrough in terms of negotiation for us and what it delivers to the people of Northern Ireland, and it ensures that they have sovereignty. It ensures that the institutions, when they're up and running again in Northern Ireland, have the ability to say that they do not want new or amended EU law to apply, and the UK government can then veto that legislation. It's unequivocal in that regard, in the power it gives us. It applies to the exact laws that the DUP, for example, set out in their 7 tests, and it puts real power and sovereignty into the institutions of Northern Ireland at Stormont. So it's an incredibly powerful mechanism. It's something that people asked for. They didn't ever expect that it would be possible to get something like that. I'm pleased that we could deliver it, and it's why I think the Windsor Framework is the right agreement for Northern Ireland.
Okay, the next question is from Anne on housing, who asks, the Conservatives used to pride themselves on being the party of home ownership, but we're not building anywhere near enough homes and not giving young people a stake in the future. When will we get building, and what's your offer to young people? So a lot of people are asking this question.
Yes, and I think, just in the interest of time, it's probably, we talked about this already. I don't want to repeat everything I said. Look, I agree. I want more young people to have the ability to buy their own home. I think the number of housing starts, new housing starts last year was up 10% on the year before. So look, things are heading in the right direction. We need to make sure that they keep doing so. Number of first-time buyers is at a 20-year high. There's more work to do. Right, this dream feels like it's out of reach for too many people. I get that. We're going to keep working very hard to make it possible for as many people as we can.
And next, a video question.
Hello, I'm Samia from London, and my question to the Prime Minister is, the ultra-low emission zone is an unfair tax on working people, families and businesses by London Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan. How will the government support London Conservatives in our campaign against it?
Well, I'll pay tribute actually to London Conservatives, who have done a superb job. Our councillors, our MPs, our activists in highlighting this, campaigning on it. Some good, because of that, there's a interesting and positive development on the legal side of this just the other day. I think that's a hard-won success, and that's the right thing to do. Otherwise, we've got to keep campaigning on this issue. And we've seen that this thing can actually, they make a difference. All the reasons that were mentioned in Cambridgeshire, actually, we won a by-election recently for I think the first time in about 16 years. We took a seat off the Lib Dems. And the big part of the pitch in Long Stanton, and a big part of the pitch was about congestion charging and these types of things in Cambridge. And it was a very effective campaign that meant that we could pick up a seat for the first time in years. So, tribute to our hard-working councillors and other activists who are highlighting these issues, the damage that they do, and that's a great reason to vote Conservative.
And the next question.
I'm Judith from Oxford, and my question to the Prime Minister is, given the hostile press that you and other politicians receive, and intrusions into your private lives, what motivates you to be a politician over having a successful, lower public profile career elsewhere?
Yes, great question, Judith, one I ask myself on a regular basis. Look, I think fundamentally most people who do these jobs do them out of a sense of public service. We're in these jobs accepting that they come with all the drawbacks that you mentioned, but they also come with this incredible privilege and opportunity to make a difference to people's lives. And that is something that keeps you going, fundamentally. And in knowing that you can make a positive difference to people, whether it's as an MP, as a councillor, or at my job, or any other job in public service, that's quite a special feeling. It's a rare privilege to be able to do jobs like this, and that's what carries me through the trickier days that I have with all the things that you mentioned. It's just also having the belief, by the way, that you know what you're doing is right, you're doing it for the right reasons, and you just have to have that inner conviction. As long as you can do that, and know that you're making a difference, and you've got the strength to keep going.
Okay, the last written question is on tax from Chris in East Grinstead, who asks, the UK has one of the most complex tax systems in the world. Are you and the Chancellor looking to simplify the tax system, as well as ideally cutting some taxes soon to help people and businesses?
Yeah, and the simple answer is yes, and that's what the Chancellor set out at the budget. Very significant tax cut for businesses to stimulate investment. And if you look at one of the reasons that our economy has been held back in the past, why productivity has not been as high or has growth not been as high as we would have liked, the lack of business investment is a very obvious explanation. So what the Chancellor's done is cut taxes for businesses that are investing in things. That's how you drive growth, that's how you drive productivity. It means that the UK is pretty much one of the most tax generous places to invest anywhere in the world, which is fantastic. But look, obviously, we want to make sure that we can lower taxes over time. I'm a low tax conservative. And in particular, we talked about this earlier, Paul, right? I believe in hard work. I want hard work to be rewarded. And that's something that I know the Chancellor believes in as well. Right now, we've got a massive problem with inflation, and we've got to get inflation down. We've got to get our borrowing under control. That's the economic priority now. That's what Nigel Lawson also believed. And we've just been talking about Nigel Lawson recently. Sadly, he's passed away, and I was privileged to have his support last year on this very question about what's the right sequence of priorities. And I think he believed, Margaret Thatcher believed, I believe, the Chancellor believes, we've got to get inflation down first, get borrowing under control, and then we've got the sound fundamentals to cut taxes. That's what I know everyone would like us to do, and that's what we want to deliver.
Last video question.
Hello, I'm Bill from Staveley. My question for the Prime Minister is, do you agree that other advanced European nations have healthcare systems that deliver superior results to the NHS? And if so, would you have the courage to have a conversation with the British people about why this is?
Well, I'd say, Bill, look, the NHS is the country's #1 public service priority. And our job is to make sure that we're trusted with it, that we're funding it properly, but not just that. We can't stop there. We've got to also make sure that it delivers for patients. And I think that's the focus that I've brought to it, is making sure that all the money we're putting in is actually delivering for everybody the healthcare that we need and deserve out of it. And we're making real progress. Cutting the waiting list is one of my priorities. There's lots of different ways we're doing that, but it's about doing things differently. It's about reform. It's about using the private sector more, the independent sector. That's something that we actually should be very comfortable with. Ultimately, if the patient is still getting the care they need, free at the point of use, we shouldn't be so hung up on who's providing it. We should be using the independent sector to provide choice, to provide competition, drive up quality. It's worked in the past, and we're going to do more of that going forward. I think that's a conservative approach to this topic about how do you deliver high quality healthcare, get the productivity that we need out of the NHS.
Just a last question. I know from talking to you in the past that you are a very serious Hindu. You take your religion very, very seriously. Could you just say something about what it does to shape your worldview? And in particular, you have a shrine in Downing Street, don't you? Who's the shrine to?
Oh, on my desk, I have a Lord Ganesh, which is very common. I think.
Who's the god of?
Well, he's got many things, but generally, when you start a new job or something like that, or you take over a new business, typically, because you would offer a prayer to Lord Ganesh because he brings you good luck when you start a new venture. So when I became Chancellor, I did that, and so the Ganesh has been with me from the time I was Chancellor, and then moved over to my desk in number 10 as well. So that's why most Indian families will do something to Ganesh at the start of a new, as I said, at the start of a new job, new business, something like that, new home. That's always the first thing you do. So that's why he's there.
Well, Prime Minister, thank you very much. We'll have to see how much luck he brings you over the next year. Who can tell? We hope to have you back soon to ask more questions, but for the moment, that's it. I want to thank the viewers for bearing with us, and just to make the point that the whole of this interview and clips of it will be available on ConservativeHome. Prime Minister, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.